The winter of 1934 hit Millfield harder than anyone could remember. Snow piled against the windows of the small wooden house on Maple Street, and inside, Thomas Mitchell sat at his kitchen table, staring at the empty coffee tin that had once held their emergency money. His calloused hands shook as he turned the tin upside down, watching the last few pennies roll across the scarred wooden surface. "Papa, I'm hungry," came the soft voice from behind him. 8-year-old Sarah stood in the doorway, her thin frame swimming in a dress that had once fit her perfectly. In the 6 months since Martha had died from pneumonia, Sarah had grown taller but thinner. Her face gaunt with the hollow look of chronic hunger. Thomas forced a smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes anymore. "I know, sweetheart. Papa's working on it." But work was scarce in Millfield. The textile mill had closed down 8 months ago, taking most of the town's jobs with it. Thomas had sold his watch, his father's tools, and even Martha's wedding ring to keep food on the table. Now, with winter deepening and no prospects in sight, he was running out of options. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered street. Other families were struggling too. The Hendersons next door had moved in with relatives in the city. The Johnsons had lost their house to the bank last month. At least Thomas owned his house outright, inherited from his parents. But owning a house didn't put food on the table or coal in the stove. "Papa, when is Mama coming back?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair beside him. It was a question she asked less frequently now, but it still pierced his heart every time. "Mama's not coming back, honey. Remember what we talked about? She's watching over us from heaven now." Sarah nodded solemnly, her small hand reaching out to touch his. "She wouldn't want us to be hungry." The simple truth of it nearly broke him. Martha wouldn't want them to be hungry. She would have done anything, sacrificed anything, to keep their daughter fed and warm. The thought sparked an idea that made his stomach clench with dread. Martha's clothes still hung in their bedroom closet. Beautiful dresses from better times, a fur-trimmed coat she'd saved for special occasions, silk scarves and delicate shoes. Sarah's own closet held clothes Martha had sewn with such care, little dresses with hand-embroidered flowers, a blue velvet coat for church, shoes that still had years of wear left in them. In the current economy, even used clothing could fetch decent money, especially quality pieces like Martha's. There were wealthy families in the next town over who might pay well for such items. The thought made him feel sick, but desperate times called for desperate measures. That evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, Thomas climbed the stairs to their bedroom. He hadn't disturbed Martha's side of the closet since her death, couldn't bear to see the empty space where her presence had once filled the room. But now, with trembling hands, he opened the closet door. Her scent still lingered faintly on the clothes, that mixture of lavender soap and the vanilla perfume he'd bought her for their 5th anniversary. He pulled out a navy blue dress with pearl buttons, remembering how beautiful she'd looked in it at the church social just 2 years ago. His vision blurred as he folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden crate he'd brought upstairs. One by one, he selected the finest pieces. The silk blouses, the wool skirts, the coat with the fox fur collar that had been her prized possession. Each item held memories that cut through him like knives. The green dress she'd worn on their first date, the yellow sundress from their honeymoon, the black dress she'd worn to his father's funeral. Holding his hand as they said goodbye. By midnight, he had filled 2 crates with Martha's belongings. The closet looked barren, violated. He sat on the edge of the bed they had shared for 9 years and wept quietly, careful not to wake Sarah. The next morning brought a new crisis. Sarah woke up coughing, a deep, rattling sound that reminded Thomas too much of Martha's final weeks. He felt her forehead and found it burning with fever. "We need to get you to Doc Peterson," he said, trying to keep the panic from his voice, but Doc Peterson required payment up front now. Too many families had promised to pay later and never could. Thomas knew he needed at least $20 for the doctor visit and medicine. The clothes in those crates might fetch $50 or more in the right market. He loaded the crates into his old truck and made the drive to neighboring Westfield, where the wealthy families lived in large houses with perfectly manicured gardens. seemingly untouched by the economic devastation that had swept through towns like Millfield, Mrs. Abernathy. The wife of a successful banker examined Martha's clothes with the eye of someone who recognized quality. She ran her fingers over the silk, checked the seams, held the fur-trimmed coat up to the light. "These are exquisite pieces," she said, her voice carrying the cultured accent of someone who had never known want. "Your wife had excellent taste." "Yes, she did," Thomas managed, his voice rough with emotion. "I can offer you $40 for the lot." It was more than he had hoped for. Enough for the doctor, medicine, and food for several weeks. He nodded, not trusting his voice to speak. Mrs. Abernathy counted out the bills, and Thomas pocketed them with hands that felt like they were betraying everything he held sacred. As he drove home, the empty crates rattling in the truck bed, he felt like he had sold pieces of his soul, but when he returned to find Sarah's fever had worsened, his resolve hardened. He took her to Doc Peterson, who diagnosed a severe chest cold that could turn into pneumonia without proper treatment. The medicine cost $18, leaving Thomas with $22 for food and coal that night. As Sarah slept fitfully, dosed with medicine that would help her breathe easier, Thomas sat in his kitchen and stared at Martha's empty closet through the bedroom doorway. He had done what he had to do, but the guilt ate at him like acid. He thought he had made the hardest choice possible, selling his beloved wife's belongings. But as Sarah's cough persisted over the next few days and the money dwindled again, he realized that his trials had only just begun. 3 weeks later, with Sarah recovered but still weak, Thomas faced another impossible decision. The medicine had worked, but it had depleted their funds. The last of the money from Martha's clothes was gone, spent on food and keeping the house warm. Now, with bills piling up and no work in sight, he found himself staring at Sarah's closet. The little dresses Martha had sewn with such love and care hung there like silent accusations. The blue velvet coat with its white fur trim that made Sarah look like a little princess. The patent leather shoes she wore to church. The silk ribbon hair bows Martha had made from scraps of her own sewing projects. Sarah caught him standing there one evening, his hand resting on the closet door frame. "Papa? Are you looking at my pretty clothes?" He turned to find her watching him with those serious brown eyes that looked so much like Martha's. She had lost weight during her illness, and her current dress hung loose on her small frame. "Just thinking, sweetheart." She joined him at the closet, her small hand slipping into his. "Mama made most of these, didn't she?" "Yes, she did. She wanted you to have beautiful things." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him with an expression far too mature for her 8 years. "Papa, are we very poor?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He wanted to lie, to protect her innocence, but the truth was written in every empty cupboard, every cold room, every meal they had skipped. "We're going through a hard time, honey, but we'll get through it together." She nodded solemnly, then something seemed to occur to her. "Papa, what happened to Mama's clothes?" "I haven't seen them lately." Thomas felt his heart stop. He had hoped she wouldn't notice, that the stress of her illness had distracted her from the empty closet in his bedroom. Now, faced with her direct question, he struggled to find words. I had to sell them, Sarah. We needed money for your medicine." Her eyes widened with understanding and something that looked like fear. "You sold Mama's clothes?" "I had to, sweetheart." "You were very sick, and we needed money for the doctor." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then looked back at her own closet full of precious dresses. In that moment, Thomas saw the realization dawn in her young face. If Mama's clothes could be sold, then hers could be too. The knowledge that his 8-year-old daughter understood their desperate situation better than he wanted her to was another weight added to his already breaking heart. That night, as Sarah slept, Thomas sat at his kitchen table again, but this time he wasn't looking at empty coffee tins. He was looking at a notice from the bank, demanding payment on taxes he couldn't afford, threatening foreclosure if the debt wasn't settled within 30 days. He had 30 days to find $120, or they would lose the only home Sarah had ever known. The house that held every memory of Martha, Every corner where their family had laughed and loved and built a life together, Thomas looked toward Sarah's bedroom, knowing what he might have to do, and felt his heart breaking all over again. The choices ahead of him would test every limit of his love for his daughter and force him to make decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But as he sat there in the darkness, listening to Sarah's peaceful breathing, he made a silent promise to Martha's memory. Whatever it took, whatever he had to sacrifice, he would keep their dot. The next morning brought no relief from Thomas's mounting despair. 29 days remained until the bank would seize their home, and he had exhausted every possibility he could think of. He had approached every business owner in Millfield, begging for work, offering to do anything from sweeping floors to hauling coal. The answer was always the same: there simply wasn't enough business to justify hiring anyone new. He had even swallowed his pride and visited the relief office, hoping for government assistance. The line stretched around the block, filled with proud men and women who had never imagined they would need charity to survive. When his turn finally came, the harried clerk informed him that the relief funds had been exhausted weeks ago. They were expecting new allocations from the state, but it could be months before any help arrived. As Thomas walked home that day, defeat weighing on his shoulders like a physical burden, he noticed Sarah playing in their small front yard. She had fashioned a doll from old rags and was having an elaborate tea party, complete with chipped cups and saucers from Martha's old china set. Despite having so little, she still found ways to create joy in their dark world. She looked up when she heard his footsteps on the wooden porch. "Papa, come meet my new friend, Miss Buttercup. She's visiting from England." Thomas managed a smile and knelt down to shake hands with the rag doll. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Buttercup. Are you enjoying your visit to America?" Sarah giggled and made the doll nod vigorously. "Oh yes, Papa. She says America is much warmer than England. She especially likes our house because it's so cozy." The word cozy struck Thomas like a hammer blow. Their house would only be cozy for 29 more days unless he found a miracle. He watched Sarah continue her elaborate game, her young mind creating an entire world of imagination to escape from the harsh realities surrounding them. That evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, Thomas found himself standing outside her bedroom door, listening to her soft breathing. He pushed the door open quietly and stepped inside, moonlight streaming through the window and illuminating her small form under the quilted blanket Martha had made when Sarah was a baby. Her closet door stood slightly ajar, and Thomas could see the array of dresses hanging inside. Even in the dim light, he could make out the blue velvet coat that Martha had worked on for weeks, staying up late by lamplight to get every detail perfect. The white fur trim had cost them a week's worth of grocery money, but Martha had insisted that their daughter deserved something beautiful. Thomas pulled the door open wider and examined the contents more carefully. There were 12 dresses in total, each one meticulously crafted by Martha's skilled hands. The fabrics were good quality, purchased during better times when Thomas had steady work at the mill. There were wool dresses for winter, cotton ones for summer, and 2 special occasion dresses made from silk and velvet. He pulled out a burgundy dress with tiny pearl buttons, remembering Martha sitting by the window on sunny afternoons, sewing each button by hand while humming softly to herself. She had made this one for Sarah's 7th birthday, and his daughter had worn it to the church social, twirling and dancing until the hem was dusty from the gymnasium. Mrs. Abernethy had paid well for Martha's clothes, praising their quality and craftsmanship. These pieces would likely fetch similar prices, perhaps even more, since children's clothing was always in demand among wealthy families. He estimated the entire collection might bring in $60 or $70. Maybe more if he found the right buyers. It would be enough to make a significant payment toward the back taxes, though probably not enough to settle the entire debt. But it might buy them time, convince the bank to accept the payment plan, give him more opportunities to find work. Thomas held the burgundy dress up to the moonlight, studying Martha's careful stitching, the way she had reinforced the seams to ensure it would last through years of wear and washing. Every thread represented hours of her time, her love, Her dreams for their daughter's future. He carefully returned the dress to its place and closed the closet door. But the image of those clothes haunted him through a sleepless night. By morning he had made his decision. He would take the clothes to Westfield and see what prices they might bring. Just to know his options, he told himself. Just to understand what possibilities existed. But first, he needed to prepare Sarah for the reality of their situation. She was young, but she was also intelligent and perceptive. She had already noticed Martha's missing clothes, and it would be impossible to hide the disappearance of her own wardrobe. After breakfast, as Sarah played with Miss Buttercup on the kitchen floor, Thomas sat down beside her. "Sarah, honey, we need to have a serious talk." She looked up at him with those solemn brown eyes. "Is it about the bank man who came to the door yesterday?" Thomas was startled. He had thought she was napping when Mr. Henley from the bank had visited to personally deliver the foreclosure notice. "You heard that?" "I heard you talking with him on the porch. He said something about 30 days. She clutched Miss Buttercup tighter. "Are we going to lose our house, Papa?" The directness of her question took his breath away. He had wanted to protect her from the worst of their troubles, but clearly she understood more than he had realized. "We might, sweetheart, unless I can find a way to pay the money we owe." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the gravity of a much older child. "How much money do we need?" "More than we have," Thomas said simply. "More than Papa can earn right now." She nodded slowly, then looked toward her bedroom. "Papa, are my pretty clothes worth money too? Like Mama's were?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Thomas felt his throat tighten as he realized that his 8-year-old daughter was offering to sacrifice her most precious possessions to save their home. "Sarah, honey, those are your clothes. Mama made them especially for you. But if they could help us keep our house?" She trailed off, her small voice barely a whisper. "Mama would want us to stay together, wouldn't she? In our house where she lived too?" Thomas pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her tight against his chest as tears threatened to overwhelm him. How had his little girl become so wise, so selfless? How had circumstances forced her to grow up so fast? "Let me think about it, sweetheart. Let me see if there are any other ways first." But even as he spoke the words, Thomas knew he was running out of alternatives. That afternoon, while Sarah played outside with the neighbor children, he carefully selected 3 of her dresses, the ones that were slightly too small for her now. Perhaps Mrs. Abernethy or someone like her had daughters who could wear them. The drive to Westfield felt longer this time, weighted with guilt and desperation. Thomas had wrapped the dresses carefully in brown paper, trying to preserve their pristine condition. Each one represented countless hours of Martha's work. Her vision of the young lady she wanted their daughter to become Mrs. Abernethy, remembered him from his previous visit, and welcomed him into her elegant parlor, where expensive furniture gleamed under electric lights. Thomas unwrapped the dresses with trembling hands, spreading them across her velvet sofa. "These are exquisite," she said, examining the handiwork with the same appreciation she had shown for Martha's clothes. "The stitching is incredibly fine. Your wife was quite talented." "Yes, she was," Thomas managed. "And these are your daughter's clothes?" Thomas nodded, unable to trust his voice. Mrs. Abernethy studied him carefully, perhaps sensing the pain behind his transaction. "I have a daughter about this size," she said finally. "These would fit her perfectly. I can offer you $25 for the 3 dresses." It was generous, more than Thomas had expected. He took the money with hands that shook, feeling like he was selling pieces of Sarah's childhood along with the fabric and thread on the drive home. He stopped at the bank and made a partial payment on their debt. Explaining their situation to Mr. Henley and begging for more time, the bank manager was sympathetic but firm. The partial payment was appreciated, but the full amount would still be due within the remaining 26 days. When Thomas returned home, Sarah ran to meet him at the door, her face bright with hope. "Did you find work, Papa?" "Not exactly, honey, but I made a payment to the bank. We have a little more time." Her face fell slightly, but she maintained her brave smile. "That's good, Papa. More time means more chances." That evening, as Thomas helped Sarah prepare for bed, She opened her closet to select a nightgown and stopped short. Her eyes moved across the hanging dresses, quickly identifying the missing pieces. "Papa?" Her voice was small and uncertain. "My blue dress with the white collar is gone, and the yellow one with the pockets." Thomas knelt beside her, his heart breaking at the confusion and dawning realization in her young face. "I had to sell them, honey. We needed money for the bank." Sarah stared at the empty spaces where her dresses had hung, her small hands clutching the closet door frame. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Will you have to sell more of them?" The question pierced through him like a sword. He wanted to lie, to promise that he would never take another thing that belonged to her. But the harsh reality of their situation made such promises impossible. "I hope not, sweetheart. I'm going to try to find another way." 21 days remained when Thomas woke to find Sarah burning with fever again. This time, her breathing was labored and she couldn't keep food down. The sight of her small body shaking with chills brought back terrifying memories of Martha's final weeks. And Thomas knew he couldn't wait for her condition to worsen. Doc Peterson examined Sarah with grave concern, his weathered hands gentle as he listened to her lungs and felt her swollen glands. "It's the same chest condition as before, but worse this time," he told Thomas quietly in the hallway outside Sarah's bedroom. "Her body hasn't fully recovered from the last bout. We need to start treatment immediately, or this could develop into something much more serious." The medicine would cost $35, money Thomas didn't have. The partial payment to the bank had depleted his funds from the 3 dresses, leaving him with barely enough for food. He stared at the prescription in his hands, the words blurring as he calculated the impossible mathematics of survival. "Doc, I don't have $35 right now, but I can get it. Can you give me 2 days?" Dr. Peterson studied Thomas's face, seeing the desperation there. "Tom, I've known you since you were Sarah's age. I don't like extending credit anymore, but—" He paused, then nodded slowly. 2 days, but not a day longer. This kind of infection moves fast in children, especially ones who've been malnourished. The word malnourished hit Thomas like a physical blow. He had tried so hard to keep Sarah fed, but clearly his efforts weren't enough. She was thin, pale, and now seriously ill because he couldn't provide the basic necessities of life that afternoon. While Sarah slept fitfully, Thomas sat at her bedside and counted her remaining dresses. 9 hung in the closet, including the burgundy one with pearl buttons that he had promised to save for last. At $25 each, they would more than cover the medicine cost. With money left over for food and perhaps another payment to the bank, but taking 9 dresses would leave Sarah with almost nothing to wear. She had 2 everyday cotton dresses that were already too small, and the clothes on her back. For a growing 8-year-old girl, it would be woefully inadequate. Thomas buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the impossible choices facing him. Every path forward seemed to require sacrificing something precious. Some piece of the life Martha had built for their family. As evening approached, Sarah's fever climbed higher. She called out for Martha in her delirium, asking her mama to come sing the lullaby about the mockingbird. Thomas sat beside her bed, wiping her fevered brow with cool claws and feeling utterly helpless. By morning, her condition had worsened. Her lips were dry and cracked, and she struggled to focus her eyes when she looked at him. Thomas knew he couldn't wait any longer. "Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you about something important." She tried to sit up, but the effort exhausted her. "Are you going away, Papa?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." "But you're very sick, and you need medicine to get better. Strong medicine that costs a lot of money." Sarah's fevered eyes moved toward her closet, and Thomas saw understanding dawn in her young face. Even in her weakened state, she grasped what he was trying to tell her. "My dresses," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, honey. I've tried everything else. There's no other way." Tears leaked from her eyes, but whether from fever or heartbreak, Thomas couldn't tell. "How many do you need to sell?" The question destroyed him. That she could ask such a practical question while burning with fever showed a strength and maturity that no 8-year-old should possess. "Most of them," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Maybe all of them." Sarah closed her eyes for a long moment, and Thomas thought she might have drifted back into fevered sleep. But then she spoke, her voice so quiet he had to lean close to hear her. "Papa, please don't take the burgundy dress. The one Mama made for my birthday. Please spare my clothes, at least that one. It's the only thing I have left that smells like her perfume." Her plea echoed through Thomas like a death knell. The burgundy dress was also the finest piece in her collection, likely worth more than any of the others. Mrs. Abernathy, or someone like her, would pay premium prices for such exquisite craftsmanship. "Sarah, I promise I'll try to save it. But if it means the difference between getting your medicine or not—" "Please, Papa," she whispered, her small hand gripping his with surprising strength. "Please spare my clothes. Isn't there another way?" Thomas held her burning hand in both of his, knowing that there was no other way, knowing that he would have to break this promise just as he had been forced to break so many others. The medicine wouldn't wait for his conscience or his daughter's pleas. Her life hung in the balance, and life mattered more than dresses, no matter how precious. "I love you more than anything in this world," he whispered. "More than any dress or any house or any possession. You are all that matters to me." Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. "I know, Papa, I love you too." After she fell asleep, Thomas sat in the kitchen and wept. Martha's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, reminding him that Sarah was their miracle, their greatest treasure. Everything else was just fabric and thread, wood and nails. Their daughter's life was worth more than all of it combined. With shaking hands, he gathered every dress from Sarah's closet, including the burgundy one with pearl buttons. He wrapped them carefully in blankets, trying to preserve their condition for the buyers who would appreciate their quality. As he worked, he remembered Martha sewing each piece, her face bright with joy as she imagined their daughter wearing them to school, to church, to birthday parties and special occasions. The drive to Westfield felt like a funeral procession. Thomas had called ahead and arranged to meet with several wealthy families who had expressed interest in children's clothing. Word had spread about the quality of his merchandise, and he found himself with multiple buyers competing for the pieces. Mrs. Abernathy examined the burgundy dress with particular interest, running her fingers over the intricate pearl buttons and admiring the French seams. "This is extraordinary work," she said. "Museum quality, really. I have friends who collect vintage children's clothing, and they would pay handsomely for something like this. I could offer you $50 for this dress alone." $50. More than enough for Sarah's medicine, with money left over for food and household expenses. Thomas stared at the dress, remembering Sarah's fevered plea to spare it, her desperate request to keep the one thing that connected her to her mother's memory. "I'll take it," he said. The words tasting like ashes in his mouth. The other dresses sold quickly as well, bringing in a total of $230. More money than Thomas had seen in months, but each sale felt like another betrayal of his daughter's trust. He drove directly to Dr. Peterson's office and purchased the medicine, then stopped at the bank to make another substantial payment on their debt. The bank manager was pleased with the progress and agreed to extend their deadline by another month, giving Thomas more time to find work or secure the remaining funds. When he returned home, Sarah was awake but weak, propped up against pillows that made her look even smaller and more fragile. Her eyes immediately went to his hands, searching for the medicine that would make her well. "Did you get it, Papa?" "Yes, honey. Dr. Peterson says this will have you feeling better in just a few days." She took the first dose obediently, then looked toward her bedroom with a question in her eyes that she seemed afraid to ask. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I had to sell all of your dresses, including the burgundy one." Her face crumpled, and Thomas saw her struggle not to cry. "Even my favorite one? The one I asked you to spare?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so very sorry. It was the only way to get enough money for your medicine." Sarah nodded slowly, tears streaming down her fevered cheeks. "I understand, Papa. I hoped." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Thomas understood. She had hoped that somehow, miraculously, he would find another way, that her beloved dress would be saved, that some piece of her connection to Martha would remain untouched by their desperate circumstances. I know, honey. I hope too. Over the next 3 days, the medicine worked its magic. Sarah's fever broke, her appetite returned, and the dangerous rattle in her chest gradually cleared. By the 4th day, she was sitting up in bed, asking for books and complaining about being confined to her room, but recovery brought its own challenges. Sarah had to face the reality of her empty closet, the bare hangers that had once held Martha's beautiful creations. She stood in the doorway of her bedroom, staring at the vacant space. Her thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs, Thomas found her there and knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. I know it hurts, sweetheart. I know you loved those dresses. It's not just the dresses, Sarah whispered against his shoulder. It feels like Mama is disappearing a little bit more each time. First her clothes, now mine. What if I forget what she looked like? What if I forget her voice? The fear in her voice nearly broke Thomas's resolve. He had been so focused on survival, on keeping them housed and fed and healthy, that he hadn't fully considered the emotional cost of their sacrifices. Sarah wasn't just losing possessions. She was losing connections to her mother's memory, tangible reminders of the love and care that had shaped her young life. Mama isn't in those, doctor,